My journey doesn't begin with shouting or dramatic confrontations you might expect. It starts in the dusty corner of my grandmother's attic on a sweltering July afternoon. Surrounded by cardboard boxes and the musty scent of forgotten memories, I was searching for old photo albums for my mother's birthday video when I found something that would unravel my entire family history, a sealed envelope marked confidential, adoption records in my grandmother's elegant cursive. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The attic was stifling, dust particles dancing in the streams of sunlight filtering through the small window.
Why my hands trembled as I held the envelope.
Weighing the knowledge it contained against 32 years of believing I knew exactly who I was, the house below me hummed with the familiar sounds of family, my mother chatting on the phone in the kitchen, my younger sister Vanessa playing with her kids in the backyard, all blissfully unaware that I was about to discover something that would change everything. I didn't open it immediately. I sat cross-legged on the wooden planks, holding this potential bomb in my hands, contemplating whether some truths are better left buried. But curiosity, that ancient, powerful force, won out. I carefully broke the seal and pulled out a stack of official-looking documents, yellowed with age but preserved with obvious care. The papers weren't about me, they were about my father, Daniel Connors, the man who had, just 3 weeks earlier, stood in front of our entire extended family at our annual reunion and announced with a smirk, "Did you all know Eliza here is adopted? We just never found the right time to tell her." Before bursting into laughter as the color drained from my face. "Just kidding, sweetheart," he'd added, throwing an arm around my shoulders as relatives chuckled awkwardly. "But you should have seen your expression." My father, who had humiliated me as he'd done countless times throughout my life, who had always treated me with a strange emotional distance while lavishing attention on my sister, was himself adopted at birth. A fact he had hidden from everyone, including, apparently, my mother. The documents were comprehensive. Birth certificates, legal paperwork, letters between my grandparents and the adoption agency, all carefully documenting the arrival of 3-month-old Daniel into their lives in 1965. I sat frozen in that attic for what felt like hours, reading and rereading the papers until the words blurred together. My father, the man who had built his entire identity around being a true-blooded Connors, who boasted about his family's prestigious lineage dating back to the American Revolution, who treated family heritage like it was the most sacred thing in the universe, was living a lie. I slipped the documents into my bag and descended the attic stairs in a daze. My mother glanced up from her cookbook as I entered the kitchen, her smile fading when she saw my expression. "Elisa, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." In many ways I had. I forced a smile and mumbled something about the heat in the attic, then escaped my car before she could ask more questions. I needed time to process, to decide what to do with this nuclear-grade information, to truly understand why this discovery hit me like a freight train. You need to know what kind of man my father is. Daniel Connors is not the cartoonish villain you might see in movies. He's charming, successful, respected in the community, a real estate developer who built half the luxury neighborhoods in our Connecticut town. But behind closed doors, he's a master of subtle cruelty, of establishing hierarchies, of making sure everyone knows exactly where they stand in his estimation. And I had always been somewhere near the bottom. I remember a Christmas morning when I was 9 years old. My sister Vanessa, younger by 3 years, received a beautiful handcrafted dollhouse that my father had spent months building in secret. I received a department store jewelry box with the price tag still attached. "Vanessa appreciates craftsmanship," he explained when he saw my face fall. "You're more practical." Or the time I graduated top of my class in high school, earning a full scholarship to Cornell. At my graduation party, my father spent the entire evening telling guests about how Vanessa, then a freshman, had been scouted for the Olympic swimming team. My achievement became a footnote at my own celebration. "You've always been so self-sufficient, Eliza," he would say, as if my independence was a character flaw rather than a survival mechanism I'd developed in a household where attention and affection had to be earned, and somehow I never quite qualified. The pattern continued into adulthood. When I launched my own architecture firm at 27, my father's response was, "It's good you found a niche. Not everyone can handle the pressure of major development like I do." When Vanessa opened a small coffee shop the following year, he invested $200,000 as startup capital and featured her in all his company's promotional materials as evidence of the Connor's entrepreneurial spirit. Don't misunderstand. I love my sister. Vanessa is a kind, generous person who has always seemed uncomfortable with our father's obvious favoritism. Our relationship has survived despite his best efforts to create a rivalry. But that doesn't erase the pain of growing up feeling like an outsider in my own family, constantly trying to earn the approval of a man who had already decided I wasn't quite worthy of it. And now I knew something about him that he had hidden from everyone, something that undermined the very foundation of his identity. I drove aimlessly for hours that afternoon, the adoption documents safely tucked in my bag, wrestling with what to do next. Part of me, a dark, wounded part I'm not proud of, wanted to use this information as a weapon, to hurt him as he had. Hurt me to expose his hypocrisy in the most public, humiliating way possible, but another part hesitated. Whatever his flaws, he was still my father. Did I really want to destroy him? And what about my mother and sister? They would be collateral. Damage in any public revelation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I finally found myself parked outside the office of Dr. Lydia Chen, my therapist of 3 years. I hadn't planned to go there. It was Sunday. After all, but somehow my subconscious had driven me to the one place where I might find clarity. I called her emergency number, and to my surprise, she answered. "Dr. Chen, I'm sorry to bother you on a weekend, but something's happened. Something big. I need to talk to someone before I do something I can't take back." To her eternal credit, she told me to come in. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in her familiar office, the adoption papers spread out on the coffee table between us. "I could destroy him with this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "After everything he's done, all the ways he's made me feel less than. I could bring his whole carefully constructed identity crashing down with one social media post." Dr. Chen studied me, her expression neutral but kind. "You could," she agreed. "The question is, what would that accomplish? And more importantly, who would it help you become?" Her question hit me like a bucket of cold water. Would it help me become? I'd spent my entire life reacting to my father, defining myself either in alignment with or opposition to his expectations. Even this impulse to expose him was, at its core, still about him, still giving him power over my choices. "I don't want to be someone who causes pain for revenge," I finally said, "even if it feels justified." "That's a powerful realization," Dr. Chen said. "So what do you want to do with this information?" I thought about it for a long moment. "I want the truth," I decided. Not just about his adoption, but about why he's treated me the way he has my entire life. I want to understand. And then I want to be free of him one way or another. Dr. Chen nodded. "That sounds like a choice that serves your healing. Not just your hurt." I left her office with a plan. Not a plan for revenge, but a plan for truth. I would confront my father privately, give him the chance to explain himself, to apologize for years of emotional neglect. Perhaps there was a path to reconciliation, to a healthier relationship. I had to at least try before taking more drastic measures. I scheduled a dinner with him for the following evening, just the two of us, something we hadn't done in years. He seemed surprised by the invitation, but agreed readily enough, suggesting an expensive steakhouse downtown, where he often entertained clients. I arrived early, choosing a quiet corner booth where we wouldn't be easily overheard. My father arrived. Exactly on time, impeccably dressed in one of his designer suits, exuding the confidence of a man accustomed to controlling every room he entered. "Eliza," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "This is unexpected. Is there some special occasion I've forgotten?" "No special occasion," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just thought it was time we talked." He raised an eyebrow, but signaled for the waiter, ordering a bottle of wine without consulting me on my preference, typical Daniel Connors behavior. Waited until we'd been served, and the waiter had retreated before pulling the envelope from my bag and placing it on the table between us. "I found something interesting at Grandma's house yesterday," I said, watching his face carefully. He glanced at the envelope, his expression unchanged. "Oh, what's that?" "Your adoption papers." The change was subtle, but unmistakable. Slight stiffening of his shoulders, a momentary freeze, before he reached for his wine glass. Anyone who didn't know him well would have missed it entirely. "I see," he said after taking a deliberate sip. "I suppose you're planning to do what with this information?" No denial, no explanation, no apology. Just a cool assessment of the threat level. "That depends," I said, fighting to keep my composure. "I thought maybe you'd want to tell me why you've hidden this your entire life, while simultaneously building your identity around family heritage. Or perhaps explain why you thought it was appropriate to publicly joke about me being adopted at the family reunion." Knowing how painful that suggestion might be given your own history, he set down his glass with precision. "Past is irrelevant. Eliza, I was an infant. I have no memory of any life before the Connors. For all practical purposes, I am a Connors." "Wait. That's not the point," I said, frustration building. "The point is the hypocrisy. The point is, you've treated me like an outsider my entire life, while you were literally the outsider you were so afraid of being." A flash of anger crossed his face. "I've given you every advantage in life. It's an excellent education, connections, a safety net most people would envy. If you felt like an outsider, that's your own perception, not reality." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. Was he truly so blind to his own behavior, or was this a deliberate gaslighting strategy? "Dad," I said, leaning forward, "you've consistently favored Vanessa over me since we were children. You've dismissed my achievements, minimized my successes, and made me feel like I was constantly failing some invisible test. Now I discover you're adopted, something you've hidden from everyone, including Mom. Don't you see how these things might be connected?" He regarded me coldly, then signaled for the waiter. "Check, please. I'm afraid I've lost my appetite." "We're not done talking about this," I said, my voice rising slightly. "Yes, we are," he replied with finality. "What I choose to share or not share about my personal history is my business. If you've felt slighted in some way, I'm sorry you see things that way. But dredging up ancient history won't change anything." The waiter appeared with the check, which my father paid without a word. As he stood to leave, he fixed me with a hard stare. "I trust this information will remain private. Family matters should stay within the family." The irony of that statement coming from him was almost laughable. Almost. "Like the joke you made at the reunion stayed private?" I asked. Expression darkened. "That was different. It was harmless. It wasn't harmless to me." He shrugged, already reaching for his coat. "You've always been overly sensitive. Perhaps that's why we've had our difficulties." And with that parting shot, he walked away, leaving me alone at the table with an untouched meal and a burning sense of injustice. I sat there for a long time after he left, trying to process what had just happened. I had extended an olive branch, given him the opportunity to explain, to apologize, to begin healing our relationship. Instead, he had dismissed me once again, retreating behind walls of denial and minimization. It was clear then that there would be no heartfelt reconciliation. No moment of revelation where he suddenly recognized the pain he had caused. The man was incapable of that level of self-reflection. As I finally left the restaurant, stepping into the cool evening air, I felt something shifting inside me. The desperate need for his approval. The wound of his rejection that I'd carried for so long, it was still there, but different somehow. Less raw, less defining. I pulled out my phone and called the one person who had always been in my corner. "Morgan, it's Eliza. I need your advice on something big." Morgan Lynn had been my best friend since college, the sister of my heart, if not my blood. She had witnessed firsthand the effects of my father's emotional neglect had helped me pick up the pieces after particularly devastating encounters with him. "I'm opening a bottle of wine right now," she said after I'd explained the situation. "Come over. This requires face-to-face consultation." An hour later, I was curled up on her couch, a glass of Merlot in hand, explaining the failed dinner. With my father? So he just walked out? You confronted him with literal proof that he's been living a lie? Morgan shook her head in disbelief. Classic Daniel Connors move. Deny, dismiss, disappear. I don't know what I expected, I admitted. A tearful confession. A heartfelt apology for 30 years of emotional neglect. Morgan snorted. From your father? The man would rather eat glass than admit vulnerability. She took a thoughtful sip of wine. The question is, what do you want to do now? You've tried the high road. He's made it clear he's not interested in meaningful conversation. About this, I stared into my wine glass, watching the dark liquid swirl. I don't know. Part of me wants to just let it go, to finally accept that he's never going to be the father I needed and move on with my life. That would certainly be the healthy choice, Morgan agreed, but another part. I hesitated. Another part wants everyone to know who he really is. Not just about the adoption, but about the hypocrisy, the emotional manipulation, all of it. Morgan studied me. Would exposing him make you feel better? Genuinely better, not just temporarily vindicated. It was the same question Dr. Chen had asked in a different form. Would revenge serve my healing, or just my hurt? I don't know, I admitted. But I do know that letting him continue this pattern, this whole carefully constructed false narrative, where he's the patriarch of this prestigious bloodline while treating me like I'm somehow less worthy, feels wrong. Not just for me, but for my mom, for Vanessa, for everyone who's bought into his mythology. Morgan nodded slowly. So maybe this isn't about revenge. Maybe it's about truth, about finally bringing reality into the open after decades of illusion. That distinction resonated deeply. Truth, not revenge. Illumination, not destruction. The annual Connors family 4th of July barbecue is next weekend, I said, an idea forming. Everyone will be their aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. It's always my father's big showcase event where he plays the generous host, the keeper of traditions. Morgan raised an eyebrow. You're thinking of dropping this bomb in front of everyone? I shook my head. Not exactly. I'm thinking of giving him one more chance to come clean himself. To tell the truth voluntarily. And if he refuses, then you'll do it for him, Morgan finished. Yes, but I need to be smart about this. Careful. If I just blurt it out, I'll look like the villain trying to hurt him. I need to approach this strategically. Morgan grinned, a spark of mischief in her eyes. Well, strategy happens to be my specialty. Let's make a plan. Over the next 2 hours, fueled by wine and years of pent-up frustration, we crafted a careful approach. Not a scheme for revenge, but a pathway to truth that would be impossible for my father to manipulate or escape from. First, I would speak with my mother privately. She deserved to know the truth before anyone else, to process. This information about her husband of 35 years away from prying eyes. Next, I would give my father a clear choice. Either he could address his adoption and his treatment of me openly with the family, or I would feel free to share what I had discovered. It wasn't an ultimatum designed to hurt him. It was a boundary clear, firm, and long overdue. Are you sure you're ready for this? Morgan asked as I prepared to leave. Once you start this process, there's no going back. Your relationship with your father will never be the same. I paused at her front door, considering. Our relationship has never been what I needed it to be. Maybe it's time to stop pretending otherwise. She pulled me into a tight hug. Whatever happens, I'm in your corner. Always. The next morning, I called my mother and asked if I could come over to talk about something important. My father would be at work, giving us the privacy we needed. She sounded concerned. Is everything okay, sweetheart? You've seemed off since you were here the other day. Everything's fine, Mom. There's just something I need to discuss with you. When I arrived at my childhood home an hour later, my mother was waiting with fresh coffee and a plate of homemade muffins, her standard response to any hint of trouble. Catherine Connors, ever the perfect hostess, even in times of crisis. Settled in the sunroom, her favorite spot in the house, surrounded by her carefully tended plants. My mother had always been the warm counterbalance to my father's coldness, though she had never directly challenged his treatment of me. A product of her generation, she believed in preserving marital harmony above all else. "Mom," I began carefully, "I found something at Grandma's house that's pretty significant. Something about Dad." Her hand stilled on her coffee cup. "What do you mean?" I pulled out the envelope, that fateful envelope that had started this whole journey, and handed it to her. "These are Dad's adoption papers. Did you know?" The color drained from her face as she stared at the documents, her hands trembling. "Slightly, no," she whispered. "I had no idea. We've been married for 35 years, and he never." She looked up at me, shock giving way to hurt. "He never told me." In that moment I realized something profound. My father's deception had wounded my mother as deeply as his emotional neglect had wounded me. We were both victims of his need to control his narrative, to present himself as something he was not. I confronted him about it yesterday, I told her. He was dismissive. Said it wasn't relevant, that it was no one's business. My mother set the papers down carefully, as if they might burn her fingers. "Your father has always been private about his feelings, about anything that might make him appear vulnerable." She looked out at the garden, gathering her thoughts. "But to keep this secret for so long, even from me?" "Mom," I said gently, "it's not just about the adoption. It's about how he's treated me my entire life. The favoritism toward Vanessa, the constant criticism, the emotional distance. And now I find out he's adopted himself. Don't you see how twisted that is?" She looked at me then, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time seeing the accumulated pain of years of subtle rejection. "I always told myself it was just his way," she said quietly, "that he showed love differently, that he was harder on you because he saw himself in you." A tear slipped down her cheek. I should have done more. Should have said something. I reached across the table and took her hand. "It's not your fault, Mom." "What are you planning to do with this information?" she asked, wiping away the tear. I told her about my plan to give Dad the opportunity to come clean himself at the 4th of July gathering. And if he refused to reveal the truth myself? She was quiet for a long moment. "You won't take this well, Eliza. You know how important his image is to him. I know. But I'm done protecting his image at the expense of my well-being. I've spent my whole life trying to earn the love he withheld. I can't do it anymore." My mother looked torn, caught between loyalty to her husband and recognition of the pain he had caused. "I won't stop you," she finally said. "But please, give him the chance to tell the truth himself first. For all his faults, he is still your father." I nodded, relieved that she wasn't asking me to maintain the secret. "I will. I promise." As I was leaving, she called after me. "Liza, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all the times I didn't speak up, didn't protect you. I thought keeping the peace was the kindest thing for everyone. I see now that I was wrong. It was the apology I had never expected, had never even allowed myself to hope for. The validation that yes, what I had experienced was real, and yes, it had been wrong. "Thank you, Mom," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "That means more than you know." I drove away from my childhood home feeling both lighter and heavier lighter for the burden of secrecy I had shed. Heavier with the responsibility of what would come next. The final piece of preparation was to speak with Vanessa. Whatever happened, I didn't want her caught in the crossfire, blindsided by revelations about our father that might shake her own sense of identity. We met for lunch the following day. At a quiet cafe downtown, my sister arrived looking every bit the successful, confident woman she had become, stylish, poised, and carrying the easy self-assurance of someone who had always known she was loved. "So, what's this urgent meeting about?" she asked after we'd ordered. "You sounded serious on the phone." I took a deep breath. "It's about Dad. I've discovered something significant, and things might get complicated at the 4th of July barbecue." Her expression turned wary. "What kind of something?" I explained about finding the adoption papers, about confronting our father, about his dismissive response. As I spoke, I watched a series of emotions cross her face: shock, confusion, hurt, and finally, a dawning comprehension. "That actually explains a lot," she said when I finished. "The way he's always been so obsessed with legacy, with the Connors name, and the way he's treated me versus you, I added quietly. Vanessa looked stricken. Eliza, I've always known he was harder on you, but I never understood why. I used to think maybe he just connected with me more easily or something. If he was adopted himself, maybe seeing me struggle for his approval reminded him of his own insecurities, I suggested. Maybe on some level he resented that I was his biological child when he wasn't a biological Connors. It's no excuse, Vanessa said firmly, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. None of this excuses how he's made you feel all these years. Her immediate support, her unquestioning validation of my experience brought tears to my eyes. Despite our father's best efforts to drive a wedge between us, we had managed to build a genuine bond. I'm planning to confront him about it at the barbecue, I told her. I'm giving him the chance to tell everyone himself. But if he refuses, I'm going to reveal the truth. Vanessa nodded slowly. I understand why you need to do this. Just be prepared for him to lash out. You know how he gets when he feels cornered, I know, but I'm done letting fear of his reaction control my choices. She smiled, a mixture of sadness and pride in her eyes. About time. Whatever happens, I'm with you. If he tries to twist this around, make you the villain somehow, I won't let him. Her unwavering support was the final piece I needed. With my mother's reluctant acceptance and my sister's firm alliance, I felt ready to face whatever came next. The week leading up to the 4th of July, barbecue passed in a blur of preparation and anxiety. I met with Dr. Chen twice, ensuring that my motivation remained clear truth, not vengeance, and that I was emotionally prepared for any outcome. I drafted and redrafted what I would say to my father when I gave him his final opportunity to come clean. I role-played various scenarios with Morgan, preparing for different potential reactions. And through it all, a strange calm began to settle. Over me, whatever happened at the barbecue, I was finally taking control of my narrative. No longer allowing myself to be defined by my father's approval or disapproval, no longer silencing my truth to preserve his carefully constructed image. The morning of the 4th dawned bright and clear, perfect barbecue weather. I dressed carefully in a simple blue sundress, applied minimal makeup, and drove to my parents' sprawling colonial home, where the annual event was already in full swing. As I pulled into the crowded driveway, I could see my father holding court. On the back patio, spatula in hand at the massive grill. Surrounded by admiring relatives as he performed his annual role as grillmaster and patriarch. For a moment, watching him through the car window, confident, charismatic, completely in his element, I almost wavered. Was I really prepared to dismantle this carefully constructed world? To potentially hurt not just him, but everyone who had built their understanding of our family around his version of reality? Then I remembered his cold dismissal at the restaurant, his lifetime of subtle cruelty masked as parental concern, the joke at the family reunion that had humiliated me in front of everyone. I stepped out of the car, adoption papers securely in my bag, and walked toward the house with my head held high. The time for hiding was over. The time for truth had come. The scene at my parents' annual 4th of July barbecue was picture perfect, like something from a lifestyle magazine spread. Red, white, and blue decorations fluttered in the gentle summer breeze. Children chased each other across the manicured lawn. The air was thick with the mouth-watering scent of grilling meat and the sound of laughter. My entrance didn't cause a stir. A few relatives waved, others called out greetings, but most were too absorbed in their conversations to notice me. My mother, however, spotted me immediately. She stood near the drink table, tension visible in the stiff line of her shoulders. Despite the pleasant smile fixed on her face, our eyes met briefly, and she gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. She hadn't told my father about our conversation. She was letting me handle this my way. Vanessa appeared at my side, slipping her arm through mine. "You ready for this?" he asked quietly. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, my eyes fixed on our father, who was flipping burgers with theatrical flair, basking in the admiration of our uncles and male cousins. "Remember," Vanessa squeezed my arm, "whatever happens, this is about truth, not punishment. Stay centered in that." Her words echoed Dr. Chen's advice, reminding me of my purpose. This wasn't about humiliating my father, as he had humiliated me. It was about finally bringing light to a lifetime of shadows. I'm going to talk to him privately first, I said. Give him the chance to do this on his terms. Vanessa nodded. Good luck. I'll run interference with the relatives if needed. I made my way across the lawn, weaving between clusters of chatting family members. My Aunt Rebecca stopped me briefly, complimenting my dress and asking about my business. I answered automatically, my attention fixed on my destination. My father saw me approaching, and his smile tightened almost imperceptibly. To anyone else, he looked like a proud father greeting his daughter. I knew better. Lisa, he said, spatula in hand, glad you could make it. Burger's almost ready for you medium well, right? Actually, Dad, could we talk privately for a moment? It's important. His eyes narrowed slightly. I'm a bit busy here, as you can see. Can it wait? No, I said firmly, it can't. Something in my tone must have registered because he handed the spatula to my uncle with a jovial takeover. For a minute, will you, Pete? Duty calls. He followed me to the side of the house, away from curious eyes and ears. In the relative privacy of my mother's rose garden, I turned to face him. What's this about? He asked, his affable host persona. Slipping away, replaced by the colder, more calculating man I knew too well. I'm giving you one chance, I said, my voice steady, despite the hammering of my heart. One opportunity to tell the family the truth yourself. His expression hardened. I thought we discussed. What happened at dinner wasn't a discussion, I interrupted. It was you dismissing me, as usual. But this isn't going away, Dad. I reached into my bag and pulled out the adoption papers, holding them up like evidence in a courtroom. Either you tell everyone the truth about your adoption today, or I will. For a moment, genuine fear flashed across his face. Fear I had never seen there before. Then his features rearranged themselves into a mask of condescending pity. You would really do that? Cause a scene at a family gathering just to what? Get back at me for some perceived slight? This is exactly the emotional instability I've always worried about with you, Eliza. It was a masterful pivot shifting from defense to attack, making me question my own motives, my own stability. It was a tactic he had employed my entire life, and for the first time, I recognized it for what it was. Manipulation, pure and simple. This isn't about getting back at you, I said calmly. It's about truth. It's about ending a lifetime of lies. It's your choice how it happens. He scoffed. My adoption, as you call it, is ancient history. I was 3 months old. I have no memory of any other family. I am a Connors in every way that matters. Then why hide it? I challenged. Why build your entire identity around a bloodline that isn't yours? Why treat me like I was somehow deficient while favoring Vanessa? Was it because I reminded you of what you tried so hard to forget, that blood isn't what makes a family? His face flushed with anger. You have no idea what you're talking about. My relationship with you and your sister has nothing to do with this, doesn't it? I pressed. You've spent my entire life making me feel like I didn't quite measure up to the Connors standard, like I was missing some essential quality that Vanessa had, all while knowing you weren't even born a Connors yourself. He took a step toward me, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. You will not breathe a word of this to anyone. You understand me? This is my life, my history, and I won't have you using it as a weapon because you're nursing some childish grievance. I stood my ground, refusing to be intimidated. I'm not the one who used adoption as a weapon. Dad, you did that at the reunion when you announced to everyone that I was adopted, then laughed it off as a joke. How do you think that felt? It was a harmless joke, he insisted. You're being oversensitive, as usual. It wasn't harmless to me, I said. And now you have a choice to make. You have until after dinner. Either you tell everyone the truth, or I will. I turned and walked away before he could respond, my heart racing but my resolve firm. I had given him his chance. The next move was his. Rejoining the party was surreal. People were laughing, drinking, enjoying the summer day, completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. I accepted a plate of food I had no appetite for and found a seat beside Morgan, who had arrived during my confrontation with my father. "How did it go?" she asked under her breath. "About as well as expected," I replied, pushing a potato salad around my plate. He's furious, defensive, and in complete denial about the connection between his secret and how he's treated me. Morgan nodded. "He's not going to come clean willingly, is he? Not a chance." She squeezed my hand. "Then you do what you need to do. I've got your back." Across the lawn, I could see my father had returned to his hosting duties, but there was a new tension in his movements, a brittleness to his smile. He kept glancing in my direction, probably trying to gauge whether I would actually follow through on my threat. The afternoon progressed with excruciating slowness. I made small talk with relatives, played with my nieces and nephews, and waited. After dinner, as was tradition, my father would make his annual toast a performative speech about family legacy, Connor's values, and the importance of bloodlines. It was the perfect moment for him to reveal the truth if he chose to. If not, it would be my moment. As the sun began its descent, turning the sky a brilliant orange, my father called for everyone's attention. The traditional toast was about to begin. Relatives gathered around the patio, drinks in hand. Expectant faces turned toward the man they all saw as the pillar of the Connors clan. I stood at the back of the crowd, the adoption papers in my hand, hidden behind my back. My mother caught my eye from across the gathering, her expression a mixture of resignation and support. Vanessa positioned herself near me, a silent sentinel of solidarity. My father raised his glass, his charismatic smile firmly in place. "Another year, another chance to celebrate what makes the Connors family special," he began, his voice carrying across the yard. "As I look around at all of you, my blood, my legacy, I'm reminded of the unbreakable bonds that connect us." He continued with his usual rhetoric about heritage and lineage, each word a deliberate choice designed to reinforce his carefully constructed identity. I watched the faces of my relatives as they nodded along, absorbing his mythology without question. As he neared the end of his speech, I knew he had made his choice. He would not tell the truth voluntarily. I stepped forward, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "I'd like to add something, if I may." My father froze mid-sentence, his glass still raised. A flash of panic crossed his face before he recovered. "With a stiff smile, of course, Elisa, the floor is yours." All eyes turned to me. In that moment, standing before my entire extended family, I had a final moment of doubt. Was I doing the right thing? Would this bring healing, or just more pain? Then I remembered Dr. Chen's question: who would this help me become? The answer was clear: someone who valued truth over comfortable lies, authenticity over appearance, genuine connection over manipulation. For as long as I can remember, I began, I've heard about the importance of Connor's blood. It's about our heritage, our legacy, our special place in the world because of who we are and where we come from. I paused, looking around at the curious faces of my relatives. 3 weeks ago, at our family reunion, my father made an announcement. He told everyone I was adopted, then laughed it off as a joke when he saw my reaction. It was humiliating, as I'm sure many of you noticed. Uncomfortable shifting and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several relatives looked down, embarrassed at the memory. What none of you knew, what I didn't know until recently, is that there is someone in this family who was actually adopted. I pulled the papers from behind my back, holding them up for everyone to see. My father, Daniel Connors, was adopted at 3 months old in 1965. These are his adoption records, which I found in Grandma's attic last week. The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye swiveled to my father, whose face had drained, of all color. The man who has built his entire identity around Connor's bloodlines, who has judged others, including his own daughter, based on how well they embodied his idea of family heritage, has been living a lie his entire life. My father's glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the patio stones. The sound seemed to break the spell of silence. "This is outrageous," he sputtered, his voice tight with fury. "How dare you? Is it true, Daniel?" My Uncle Peter stepped forward, his expression stunned. "Were you actually adopted?" My father looked around wildly like a cornered animal. It's not relevant. I was an infant. I've always been a Connors in every way that matters." "Then why hide it?" asked my voice carrying across the suddenly silent gathering. "Why build your entire identity around something that wasn't true?" And more importantly, why use the very thing you feared being seen as an outsider, as a weapon against your own daughter? My mother moved to stand beside me, her presence a silent affirmation of my words. On my other side, Vanessa did the same. My father looked at the three of us standing together, and something seemed to crumble inside him. The careful facade he had maintained for decades was finally, irrevocably cracking. "You have no idea," he said, his voice barely audible. "None of you do. What it was like growing up knowing I was different, that I wasn't really theirs." Collective gasp went through the gathering. It was the first time he had ever publicly acknowledged his adoption. "I was 7 when I found out," he continued, seeming to forget the audience, lost in his own painful memories. "I overheard my parents, your grandparents, talking about it. They never meant to tell me, never planned to acknowledge that I wasn't." "Really a Connors?" The vulnerability in his voice was something I had never heard before. Despite everything, I felt a twinge of compassion for the child he had been, discovering such a profound truth by accident. "So I decided I would be more of a Connors than anyone," he said. "I would embody everything the name stood for, so completely that no one would ever question my place in the family." Ah! And it worked. I became exactly what a Connors was supposed to be: successful, respected, the keeper of traditions. He looked directly at me then, something like recognition dawning in his eyes. "And when you came along, Eliza, so different, so independent, so unwilling to simply fit the mold I had created, terrified me. You reminded me of everything I had tried to suppress in myself." The admission hung in the air between us, a truth so long buried that its emergence seemed to physically change the atmosphere. "That's why you favored Vanessa?" I asked, my voice softer now. "Because she was easier to mold into your idea of what a Kana should be?" He nodded slowly. "She was like a blank canvas, eager to please. You were. You questioned everything, challenged every assumption. It's just like I wanted to before I learned it wasn't safe." The realization was staggering. My father's emotional neglect, his constant criticism, his subtle rejection, it had never been about me at all. It had been about his own unresolved trauma, his fear of being exposed as an imposter in his own family. Understanding flooded through me, not erasing the pain of the past, but transforming it into something I could finally make sense of. My Aunt Rebecca stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on my father's arm. "Danny, we wouldn't have cared. Not then, not now. You're our family, adoption papers or not." "She's right," Uncle Peter added. "My God, man, did you really think we'd see you differently if we knew?" My father looked around at the circle of face. It's concerned, confused, but not rejecting, not judging. The fear that had driven him for decades had been largely imaginary. "I don't know what happens next," I said, addressing both my father and the gathered family. "But I do know that I'm done living in the shadow of a lie, done trying to earn approval based on some fictional standard of what makes someone worthy. Of being a Connors." I turned to face my father directly. "I hope you're done too, Dad. Because the irony is, in trying so hard to be the perfect Connors, you miss the chance to just be yourself. And in rejecting me for not fitting your mold, you missed knowing who I really am." For a long moment, my father stared at me, complex mixture of emotions playing across his face: anger, fear, shame, and something that might have been respect. Then he did something I had never seen him do in my entire life. He began to cry. Not dramatic sobs, but silent tears that carved paths down his weathered cheeks. He made no move to wipe them away, standing exposed in his vulnerability before the family he had spent a lifetime trying to impress. "I don't know how to be anything else," he said quietly. "I've been playing this role for so long, I don't know who I am without it." It was perhaps the most honest thing he had ever said to me. "Maybe it's time to find out," I suggested. "Not for my sake, or for anyone else's. For yours." The gathering had fallen into a respectful silence, witnesses to a family revelation. That went far deeper than anyone had expected when they arrived for a simple holiday barbecue. My mother stepped forward then, taking my father's hand in a gesture of support that surprised me. "We can figure it out together," she said. "Of us. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of quiet conversations, tearful revelations, and cautious reconciliations. The family party that had begun as a celebration of patriotic pride had transformed into something more profound, a dismantling of old falsehoods, and perhaps the beginning of more authentic connections. As darkness fell and fireworks began to burst overhead, painting the sky in brilliant colors, I found myself sitting on the porch swing beside Morgan, watching the spectacle in contemplative silence. "You did it," she said finally. "You spoke your truth." "I did," I agreed, still processing the enormity of what had happened. But I never expected him to actually break like that, to admit everything. Morgan nodded. Sometimes the strongest seeming people are the ones holding themselves together with the thinnest threads. Pull one, and the whole facade unravels. "I'm not sure what happens now," I admitted. "This doesn't magically erase 30 years of emotional neglect." "Of course not," Morgan agreed. "But it creates space for something new. Understanding doesn't equal instant healing, but it's a necessary first step." She was right. The revelation of my father's adoption and his subsequent confession about why he had treated me as he had didn't immediately repair our damaged relationship. But it did something equally important. It placed the pain in context. It gave meaning to experiences that had previously seemed like random cruelty. Across the lawn, I could see my father in quiet conversation with his brother, their heads bent close together in what appeared to be the most honest exchange they had ever shared. My mother sat nearby, occasionally joining in, her hand resting supportively on my father's back. Vanessa approached, dropping onto the swing beside me with a heavy sigh. "Well, that was the most dramatic 4th of July barbecue in Connor's family history." Despite everything, I laughed. Sorry to upstage. "The fireworks? Are you kidding? That was better than any pyrotechnics." She bumped her shoulder against mine affectionately. "How are you feeling?" I considered the question carefully. Lighter, I decided. Like I've been carrying this invisible weight my whole life, and suddenly it's gone. Not because Dad magically transformed into the father I always wanted, but because I finally stopped needing him to be. Vanessa nodded thoughtfully. "That's the real freedom, isn't it? Not getting the approval you craved, but no longer craving it." Her insight struck me profoundly. That was exactly it. The liberation I felt wasn't because my father had finally seen me clearly or valued me properly. It was because I had finally stopped measuring my worth by his assessment. "What do you think will happen with Dad?" Vanessa asked, glancing toward our father. "Do you think this will actually change him?" "I don't know," I admitted. Change at his age, after decades of rigid thinking, won't come easily. But for the first time, I think you might actually want to try. As if sensing our discussion, my father looked up and met my gaze across the lawn. There was no smile, no immediate transformation into a warm, loving parent. But there was something new in his eyes. A recognition, perhaps. An acknowledgement of my existence as a separate, valid person rather than an extension or reflection of himself. He gave me a small, uncertain nod. I returned it, equally uncertain but willing to see what might grow in the space cleared by truth. The days following the 4th of July revelation were strange and tender, like the raw skin beneath a bandage recently removed. My father and I circled each other cautiously, neither quite sure how to navigate this new terrain of honesty. He called me 3 days after the barbecue, his voice stiff with unaccustomed humility. "Eliza, I've been thinking about what you said, about finding out who I am beyond the role I've been playing." "Yes," I prompted, when he fell silent. "I've scheduled an appointment with a therapist," he said, the words clearly difficult for him to speak. "Someone who specializes in adoption issues and family dynamics." It was the last thing I had expected from him, an actual concrete step towards self-examination and potential change. That's good, Dad, really good. "I don't expect it to fix everything between us," he added quickly. "I know I've done damage that can't be easily repaired, but I thought you should know I'm trying." "Thank you for telling me," I said, genuinely moved by the effort this call must have cost him. "It means a lot." After we hung up, I sat for a long time, turning the conversation over in my mind. There was no dramatic promise of transformation, no tearful plea for forgiveness. Just a small, practical step towards something different. And somehow, that felt more genuine than any grand gesture could have been. A week later, my mother invited me to lunch at her favorite cafe. She looked different, somehow lighter, more present. The strain of maintaining my father's illusions had clearly taken a toll I hadn't fully appreciated. "He's different," she said, when I asked how things were at home. "Quieter, more reflective. Sometimes I find him looking through old family albums, studying photos of his parents or grandparents with this look of concentration, like he's trying to solve a puzzle." "Is that a good thing?" I asked. She considered. "I think so. It's like he's finally allowing himself to ask questions he's been avoiding his whole life. Who he really is, where he came from, what parts of himself he buried to become the person he thought he needed to be." "And you?" I asked. "How are you handling all this?" My mother smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "Discovering that I've been playing a role too, Eliza. The supportive wife who never questioned, never challenged. It wasn't just your father who was living behind a facade." Her candor surprised me. "What happens now?" "I don't know exactly," she admitted. "But for the first time in our marriage, we're having real conversations. Difficult ones, sometimes painful ones, but real. That feels like progress." As summer deepened toward fall, a gradual shift occurred in my family, not a dramatic transformation, but a subtle realignment. My father and I began to build something new from the ashes of our old relationship. Not the close father-daughter bond I had longed for as a child, but something possibly more valuable. A relationship based on truth rather than performance. On seeing each other as we actually were, rather than as we wished the other to be. We'd started meeting for coffee every other week, short encounters in neutral territory. Our conversations were sometimes awkward, sometimes strained, but increasingly authentic. He asked about my business not to judge or compare, but with genuine curiosity. I asked about his therapy, and he answered honestly about the challenges of confronting long-buried emotions. "I'm learning that I've been angry my whole life," he told me during one of these meetings, staring into his coffee cup as if it held some profound truth. "Angry at being given away by my birth parents, even though I was too young to remember them. Angry at my adoptive parents for not telling me the truth from the beginning. Angry at myself for feeling different, for not being the perfect son they wanted." He looked up at me then, his eyes clear and direct. "And I took that anger out on you, Eliza. Not because of anything you did, but because you reminded me of the part of myself I couldn't accept, the part that didn't quite fit, that asked uncomfortable questions, that wouldn't just go along to get along. You projected your self-rejection onto me," I said, the insight from months of my own therapy helping me name what had happened. He nodded slowly. "Yes, and I'm so deeply sorry for that. It wasn't a magic eraser for the past, but it was something. I had never expected to hear a genuine apology rooted in self-awareness rather than defensiveness." "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." We sat in silence for a moment. The space between us filled not with tension, but with a new kind of understanding. "I don't know if I can ever be the father you deserved," he said finally. "What?" "I'd like to try to be a better one than I've been." "I'd like that too," I replied, realizing with some surprise that I meant it. As I drove home from that meeting, I thought about the long, complicated journey that had brought us to this point. How finding those adoption papers in my grandmother's attic had set in motion a cascade of revelations and reckonings that had transformed not just my relationship with my father, but my understanding of myself. I had spent so much of my life trying to earn the love and approval of a man who had been incapable of giving it freely, because he had never learned to love or approve of himself. The recognition of that pattern had finally freed me from its grip. The truth, once feared and hidden, had become the foundation for something new, not perfect, not without pain, but real. And in that reality, there was a kind of grace I had never expected to find. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.